Also testing. 1, 2, 3.
The king of my heart, be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from, always my song. And let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life, always my song. Yes, you are good. You're good. Oh, 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 now let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he's my song. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he's my, oh, sing it again. Let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he's my, oh, I know. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he's my soul. It's so good. You're good. Oh, you are good. You're good. Oh, you are good. You're good. Oh, you are good. You're good.
You're never gonna let me down. And you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. No, Lord, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let
Hello, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to Grandview Christian Church here at the Cityview campus. It is an exciting day for us to be together. It is our third birthday, which is good news. We can clap for that. in addition to being a reason to celebrate our third birthday, maybe even as a way to kind of mark, hey, this is how we will celebrate and mark occasions and seasons in the life of our church. This is our first, we're just going to call them Table Sundays. And part of what goes into a Table Sunday, as you can see, is gathering around tables, because indeed that's how Jesus followers have always been, a family around a table, and that's actually us most weeks, but this is a way to remind and center our gathering around this meal here at the table. I love the theologian Leonardo Boff, as he talks about the development of human civilization. He says the table fellowship is one of the most ancient signs of human intimacy, since the relationships that sustain the family are built and rebuilt continuously through gathering at the table. And that's what we do as a church. That's what we're doing here today. It makes me glad to worship here together with you. You're invited to join in worship in a way that helps you to connect with God and with one another here. There are some STEM resources in the back, there's a lot of different backs to the room, I guess, today. But there are some STEM resources there. If that can help support your attention and presence here, we want that for you. But most of all, we're glad to be here together today as a gathered family around the table as we now continue in our worship.
Take and seal it for thy courts above. Luke 4, 16 through 21. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." The word of the Lord. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. been held in your hands from the moment that I wake up till I lay my head. I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing the goodness of God. Your voice. You have led me through the fire, the darkest night. You are close like no other. Know you as a father, know you as a friend. I have the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. Every breath all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am, oh, I will sing the goodness of Cause all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. Every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing the goodness of Amen. We are going to take a few minutes to just get around, talk to people, and say hello. And at the end of that gathering time, if the kids could all go to this area with Molly Dines waving her hand. Second grade and younger, that would be great. But we'll take a few minutes and then we'll come back to pray together. So you're welcome to coffee, and we'll see you in a minute. And cupcakes. You may also get the cupcakes.
Good morning, Grandview family. These are your announcements for Sunday, February 5th. We have a chili cook-off coming tonight from 5 to 6:30 here at Grandview's Buffalo campus. My husband Matt will be facing off with the previous winner, Glenn Davis, and I think we know who's gonna win that face-off. So come eat some good chili and enjoy some friendly competition tonight. This semester of 2 for 2 is coming up soon, starting March 1st. We'll have signups available sometime this month. Be looking out for those. And we are so looking forward to talking about friends and friendship with you as it fits the Christian life. So make sure to mark off Wednesday nights on your calendar in the coming months. Parents' Night Out is back again this month. On February 17th, parents of young ones are invited to drop their children off from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the Buffalo campus. They should sign up in the app before they drop off their kiddo, and we look forward to giving parents a chance to take a break for an evening. Our Cannonball class returns March 12th through April 2nd from 4 to 5 p.m. at the Buffalo campus. This is an opportunity for those who are considering a path towards baptism to come and find out what all that might mean for their lives. There are lots of ways to get more information about these announcements and anything else going on in our Grandview family. You can do that through checking out our newsletter, going to the information tables at both campuses, or by using the Church Center app. And with all of that in mind, you are in the know.
God, how could we keep from praising you? You have surrounded us with signs of your artistry and compassion. Why would we spare our foggy-breathed awe when the sun casts the sky in pink and gold on these cold winter mornings? Why would we reserve our heaviest sorrows when you have always listened to them? Why would we save our joy while we have this community to share it with? We gather together this morning in praise and reflection and in hope. Despite our experiences, despite our ages, and despite our doubts, we walk alongside one another through our faith journeys. Our hope in you has held us together, an ark on a sea of change. We have greeted newcomers and said farewells to old members. We have reached out desperately to you and to each other through a global era of uncertainty. And you and this community reached back. Even recently, we have been wading through transition, and you had already placed people in our community who could lead, who could teach, and who did rise to the occasion. If Abraham could leave his homeland, if Moses could pick up his staff, if Mary could bear a miracle child, then we can trust that through you, our transitions will become growth. God, as we enter this new era, we ask that you guide us as a congregation to do good. Open our eyes to the work that waits for us in our surrounding community and within our own walls. Guide our leaders, old and new, to find the right words and to hear with understanding. We ask that you help this congregation to be purposeful for those wandering, wondering, and unwanted. Be with us through the we'll figure it out moments. Remind us that even as we change, you do not. May we, as a congregation, grow into a deeper and more meaningful relationship with you. Amen.
Our sermon text this morning is from Romans 8:18 through 22. I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now. The word of the Lord.
Well, it's finally here. The day you've all been waiting for with bated breath. We finally have cupcakes at church. Today really is a bit of an occasion, and I guess we should also say I'm sorry to the folks joining online. We don't have online cupcakes for you, but we're still glad that you are here and a part of our worship today. Today is a bit of an occasion, and not just for one or two reasons. Today is the start of a new sermon series for us. It's called The Restoration Project, and it'll carry us for the next few weeks until the start of the season of Lent. And all we're going to do in these next few weeks is try and look at God's entire project and hope and vision for the whole world. So that's all we're going to cover in the next few weeks. That's it. So today is the start of the Restoration Project series, but also, as I hope maybe you noticed some balloons or the cupcakes or saw online ahead of time. Today, we get to celebrate 3 years since we launched the Cityview campus. Yeah. Matt's one of those really brave guys that's like, you really want to have him in the congregation when you're preaching because he'll clap first, and that just helps all of us. Today is a chance to celebrate, to look back, to give thanks to God that we've made it, that we're here together, because that's good news. Today also marks a turning point for us as a community, from a time of interim preaching and leadership as we kind of enter a new chapter of our life together. It's my first chance to preach as the Cityview campus minister. And it's exciting and daunting, but it's the start of something new that it's our hope will bring life and a fresh kind of new starting point for us together as we continue our journey of faithfulness. And then, as if all of that wasn't enough, I thought, how could I make this an even more complex morning to navigate my first sermon? It's like, what if we do our first table Sunday too? And I said a little bit, but our hope and vision is that every once in a while we can gather like this to kind of remind ourselves of what we always are. We're a family around tables together, and sometimes it's helpful to adapt kind of our external surroundings to remind us of internal states and dispositions. And in a room like this, we get to be flexible and creative. And so thanks for bearing with us, but it's kind of an odd new way, but I'm excited about it. I think it's a good thing. I'm going to try not to get dizzy, too. As I was practicing the sermon, I was like turning in circles in my office, and we'll see how long that can last. But with a lot of things to say today, a lot of good things, too. It's hard to organize all of them, but I figured I'd do my best to make a couple of observations just about birthday parties in general. And I think that it can maybe help us to parse the layers of the moment where we find ourselves in the life of our church. And it actually, I think, might prepare us to meet the text of Romans 8 that Amber read for us. At birthday parties, we tell stories. At a kid's birthday party, especially a young kid, I kind of imagine the kids kind of doing whatever small kids do, and the parents or grandparents, aunts, uncles, other folks, you tell the stories, they just start to come up. Oh, you remember her first steps, or you always did have a special connection with Grandpa because of that one time that, the story, they flow from us like that. We love to tell stories, and we jump right for the good ones. We love to tell those good stories. And the thing is, here at our party, even though we launched the Cityview campus at what felt like the worst time to start a campus, we've still had a lot of highlights these last 3 years. We've got a lot to celebrate as we gather here today. And so we celebrate today because in 2018 and 2019, as Grandview was navigating kind of a need to find a way to make room for people to gather, we celebrate that the elders, the leadership, imagined something new, creative, and brave, more creative and brave than another parking lot that was going to be expensive and only add a couple dozen parking spots. We celebrate today for that creativity and bravery that even preceded any services here. Not long after announcing that plan, we celebrate today because right away Mackenzie and Amber and Chloe were assembled as this dream team of creative, capable leaders to envision a new way for us to gather as one church. Folks all throughout the congregation stepped up to commit to be a part of this new thing called the Cityview campus. Some kind of permanently as a way of saying we are going to worship here. Others as a way of saying we're going to give 6 months or a year to help to help create some stability before transitioning back to what we had to learn to call the Buffalo campus. We committed financially. We attended trainings for how to do all of these weird setup things. Brandon has a lot of great stories about using tools and stuff. He's a big tool user, and it really played to his strengths during that time. But together, since then, we have celebrated baptisms. We have celebrated the chance to meet people that we would have never met otherwise. Some of you are here, and you would not be here if we had built a parking lot. And that is cause for celebration, for gratitude today on our birthday. Many of us here, whether we were connected at Grandview before or not, have found this campus to be a lifeline for us when our faith or our lives have been strained or broken or on the rocks. This place has been a life-giving connection to the church, maybe when there had been none or it was failing. College students, you all have become an important part, not just of the college-age ministry, not just of this campus, but college students are some of the key volunteers and leaders in areas throughout this whole campus. And Molly, whom we've gotten to hire, she started as an innocent volunteer, and before we know it, she's leading our kids area with almost no notice in this interim time. And that is cause for celebration and good news today. There are many events and moments that come to mind that are worth remembering and celebrating. If you were here on February 9th of 2020, after the first service Sunday, we packed this room out with people from the church to celebrate a potluck in anticipation of what God was doing and was going to do. That's been good news. Collectively, many of us have endured really difficult times and have found support, have found consolation, community here in this congregation. And that, friends, is a cause to celebrate. Do you remember Mackenzie's creative vision for a Stations of the Cross experience that has become a staple of our whole church's liturgical year? That's cause to celebrate today. And how many times did Mackenzie, while preaching, or Amber, while leading worship, provide an insight or host a moment that was a moment for connection with the way the Spirit was at work in your life? The Spirit was at work in your world. We celebrate Ash Wednesday. We celebrate the gathering at the gallery or trivia night, chances for the whole church to gather together in this new space that feels like we're still getting used to in some ways. And that's a good thing. We're adjusting here. So many things have been so good. But the thing about birthday parties is that it's kind of an odd phenomenon, I guess, but you come around to telling some of the hard stuff too, don't you? Because it doesn't help us here at our party or in the life of caring for a kid if we just pretend like everything's been awesome all the time to keep on the sunny side. Because the last 3 years have been extra and specifically tough, haven't they? It's maybe counterintuitive to acknowledge the hard parts or the hard memories, as if it would be better to suggest maybe we didn't have them or they're in the past, they're behind us now, everything is smooth. But the highlights, there's something about us where we want to tell, we want to honor and acknowledge the challenges that have been a part of our story as well. You remember at a birthday party maybe the health scare a kid had in their first year, or maybe that year where they just wouldn't sleep and you were tired and angry for a whole year. We tell those stories at birthday parties too. You perhaps don't need to be reminded that we launched this campus on February 9th of 2020, which gave us 6 Sundays before COVID changed our whole world. And that's on a big scale. At our own personal scale, in our own lives, we have endured great pain, great sorrow. Our services, Joy and I tried to piece together the timeline this week, looking at Instagram posts and notifications. At least 5 times, I think, at this campus, we went online, or we came back kind of with masks or with registration, and then we closed again because the numbers were spiking, or we had to reopen, and it was a stressful, wearisome time. Individually, we have known in our community the sting of death more closely over the last 3 years. Our brothers, our grandparents, our family, friends, mentors, we have lost, that we mourn in the course of these last 3 years. Together, we've endured divorces. We have felt the strain and stress of shifting faith in our lives. We have had friends and family, maybe in our own lives, who are not able or interested to stay connected to this church or to God through Christian community. And that has been hard and wearisome and difficult. We've felt our own anxieties increase through these hard times, often precisely connected to our experiences at churches. I mentioned earlier that sometimes a cause for celebration is when we receive support and care in a hard time. But friends, many of us have had hard times and have not felt support and care from one another in this congregation. We have even hurt one another. We have been the cause of pain for each other. We felt the uncertainty when we learned about Mackenzie's resignation, that yes, we're going to miss her, and what's going to come next? We'd never been a Cityview campus without her leadership and presence with us. And friends, that's just a short list of the things in our specific community, to speak of the challenges in the whole world over the last 3 years. We shouldn't gloss over the often apocalyptic feeling that has accompanied the events of the last 3 years. We've witnessed tragedies. We've witnessed brokenness on public display. The pandemic alone throughout the world has accounted for an estimated 6.8 million deaths. That's devastating. In our country and in our world, we've witnessed violence and war and mass shootings and police brutality, the effects of climate change and global unrest in the midst of the disastrous effects of a people who are not at peace. We feel the increase of loneliness and the decline of mental health that our culture, that we are experiencing. Our public spheres have been polarized, and our national leaders often seem unable to even engage in public dialogue that could be a source of hope or direction. And I know that we've just told some of the stories about the highlights and the good memories of the last 3 years. But we experience those in a strained context, don't we? We know that things haven't all been right. And in fact, they've often been very, very wrong. And this brings us to what we heard from Amber reading Paul in the book of Romans today. He's working out a theology for a people who are under duress. They are navigating internal tensions as well as a vulnerable social standing as a young community of Christians in Rome. The community of people he knows and loves is experiencing disorientation and despair. They are wondering if their future together is worth the pain and strain that they are presently experiencing. Paul does write about giving thanks in all circumstances and being joyful elsewhere. But in the book of Romans, it seems that Paul himself, along with the people he's writing to, are wearied by the present state of affairs. Paul holds out a firm hope that God will set things right, that God's restoration project will go on. But he has to recognize at present, it is hard to see it. Things are not yet right. As he looks around, he writes and describes the way that all of creation is groaning, is yearning, feeling the strain between the way things are and the way things will and should be. We feel that too, I think. The strain between the way things are and the way things can and should be. And this is where we begin with our Restoration Project series. For Paul and for us to talk about hope and expectation that God will make all things right. It begins with an acknowledgement. We called the sermon today, Recognize, that things are not currently right. And this isn't to try and convince anyone of something that we know that we don't think is true. In some ways, I think beginning the Restoration Project story here, I hope can be a validation. Because friends, it's pretty clear to me in the way that I think about my memories and stories over the last 3 years and more, that it's not all been right. And we begin this Restoration Project series by saying, that's correct. Things are not right, and the strain you feel is not only valid, but it's an accurate reading of the way that the world is. It really is messed up. For Paul, in the midst of his hope and facing the challenges, he describes these groanings, these strainings as labor pains. The experience, painful experience of birthing a new creation, that God is at work in the midst of all of this, that new life is being born, but it sure hurts in the meantime. The experience of longing, of this groaning, whether it's of protest or whether it's a cry for help, that experience of strain is a sign of the hope that there is something more to be realized among us. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. writes about this phenomenon of the tension we feel in our lives between us and the present moment. He uses the term maladjustment. He says, there are certain things in our nation and the world about which I am proud to be maladjusted, and which I hope all people will be maladjusted. And he has a list of different sorts of things to which we ought to be maladjusted, where we ought to feel strain. When there is evil and wickedness and hurt that happens in the world, that ought not to feel right. We ought to be maladjusted to the ways that we hurt one another. That ought to be a strain for us. We ought to refuse to see the difficulties in our story, in our lives, as normal, as something to be accepted or something to be kind of assented to. What we learn in Paul is that our experience of this dissonance is a good one, and that God, by the Spirit in and among us, experiences this same strain as well. The passage continues a few verses later to say that the Spirit groans with us when we don't have the words to voice to God about the strain that we're feeling. God is maladjusted to the evil and to the injustice and to the pain that we feel, such that the whole thing becomes flipped eventually, such that we can begin to see and hope that it is in fact the evil, it is the injustice, it is the unkindness, it's the lack of regard for our neighbors that is indeed maladjusted to the future that God is bringing about in God's restoration project. But friends, we know that we don't have that full realization yet. But our experience of disorder together comes from our common calling and invitation to live as a part of the kingdom of God, even in the midst of this hard time. And so, friends, at this party, we're not just sharing the highlights, but we're also sharing what's been painful. We also share where we are groaning. But when we do that at a party, where we're gathered together, our common strain, our common difficulties become a source of connection to one another and to God, whom Paul says groans and strains with us. And this is why at a party, telling the hard parts of the story enriches the celebration. It gives an occasion for gratitude. And friends, it's important that we speak clearly here. We are saying that the hard parts and the painful things we've shared are an appropriate part of the celebration because God has gathered us here in spite of them. We are not saying that our hardships are a necessary condition for what has been good, or we're not trying to put things on a scale to say things have been so good that the bad things weren't really bad. That's not what we're saying, friends. We also don't want to imply, as we talk about what's been good, that the bad things are all behind us. I fully expect that we have hardships present, perhaps unresolved conflict present in this room. But when we seek to be a people that are maladjusted together, in the hope that God is at work to set things right, we can begin to be a people of hope. And Paul continues in this passage to say that it is in hope that we are saved. When something big happens in my life, and I know that I'll be asked questions about it, unfortunately, I'm somewhat of a bit guy, where it's like I can develop kind of a way to tell a story efficiently, maybe a little humorously. I love to get a little laugh. And so 3 years ago, we started the Cityview campus, and I've talked a lot about the Cityview campus since then, of course, and I've developed ways of talking about it, and you've heard, I did some of it in this sermon already. We launched in February of 2020, at the worst time to start a campus. You know, it's like part of the bit, you know, and you all laughed at it too, that's encouraging to me. You know, the bit is landing. Just a couple of months ago, I was at a Welcome to Grandview service. About every other month, we host I said Welcome to Grandview service. We call it a class, but every other month or so, we host a gathering for people who are new or curious about Grandview. And so I was there, and I met a woman named Alexa Northrup. She's pretty new to the church. Her husband and her kids have been getting connected at the Buffalo campus. She's never been over here. I don't know if she knows. I don't see anybody saying, oh, yeah, we know Alexa. I don't know if she knows anyone over here. And so she said, she learned I was the children's minister over here. And she said, well, what's the Cityview campus like? And I settled right into the bit, aiming for informative but humorous, holding things lightly while communicating. I delivered the line, you know, it was the worst time to start a new campus. Her brow kind of furrowed a little bit. She thought about, she was just absolutely unimpressed by my bit, which was disappointing. But in such a way that it didn't even occur to her why that would be funny. And she said, actually, it sounds to me like we were just in time. And friends, that moment for me to imagine our life together as happening just in time was a rush of peace and of clarity, resolve, and hope, purpose. I've been a part of this thing since before we ever met here, and her offhand comment, never having been here, changed the way that I think about our whole story. Friends, we've not had an easy run of it. It's been really hard. But I tell you what, I've come to believe Alexa. I think she was right. And I think that's the way that God often works. Just in time. In many of our own lives, the Cityview campus has been like that. A lifeline just in time. In our whole church, the Cityview campus created a forced vulnerability and extension where as we entered this COVID thing, we were extended in a way we weren't planning on, and it kept us engaged and motivated when a lot of churches really struggled to stay connected to one another. It was just in time. I know folks in this room, we don't know where we would be if it wasn't for this gathering doing our best to labor through the hard times of the last 3 years. One of the moments that I initially listed in my highlight list that I guess belongs here a little more, I'll never forget a Sunday this summer. As I looked around the room, I've gotten to know enough of our stories, and I could see the way that each person seated in the rows was carrying a great weight, a great sadness or pain or difficulty. And it sucks. But friends, I'm so grateful that we have been a just-in-time community to begin learning how to share that with one another. God has a way of working through what couldn't have been predicted or bet on, or what strategists, if they could tell the future, would have said, don't start that campus. But when we consider the big picture of God's restoration project, we begin with the recognition that things aren't as they should be, out there, or in here, or in here. But friends, we are a part of that project. God is at work in our midst, restoring us to God, to one another. God is at work in the world to bring about the kingdom of God that Jesus talked about in Luke 4 that Amber read for us. We are being restored together as part of the present sign of what God is doing, a future reality, where the images that we are given of what's to come are of a celebratory gathering around a table, in peace, in flourishing, for all people, for all of creation. And so just like that, we're gathered here together today around a table, a misfit group of maladjusted people. In many ways, we have had a hard time, and we come limping to this table. But today at a party, we get a chance to share what has been so good and share what has been so hard in a future-oriented way that is in hope and in faith and in confidence that God is at work, even in the midst of our pain and difficulty. From the very beginning, Jesus' followers have been folks gathered around a table to share a simple meal, the gifts of God shared with one another as the people of God. And so, friends, that's what we're going to do today, and Amber will read our liturgy for us, and in an effort to just remind ourselves of what we always are, Chloe and I will bring the elements to you at your table. I'd invite someone to be brave and to maybe go first, but break off a piece of the bread and share it with the person next to you. Serve one another as we celebrate this meal together that Jesus' followers have always shared together. And together, we grow to be the family of the Restoration Project.
Let's look at this together. This is the part of our worship where we culminate and we unite here together at Jesus' table. In communion, the loaf and the cup help us reflect on the history of our tradition in the Last Supper. Communion is a practice where we get to come face to face with a member of our community and be reminded that we are in this together. And by receiving this from another Christ follower, we are reminded that we are recipients of Christ's grace. Jesus set this table with place for anyone who call themselves followers of Jesus. It is not a table for those who are deserving, as we know Jesus was ridiculed for the inclusivity of his table. It is a table where we all can find life. On the same night that Jesus was betrayed and arrested, leading to his crucifixion, he ate this meal with his followers. We follow the same teaching and example he left with them, and that the global church has followed since. As Jesus did, we give thanks, and we break this bread as a representation of Jesus' body broken for us. We take and we drink of the cup as a representation of the blood that poured from Jesus' body, shed for us. And when we eat and drink this together, we are coming together as the no matter what family that God made us through Jesus. And together we remember his death, we proclaim his resurrection, and we await his return to us.
A quick seat, and I just got a couple of things to remind us of before we wrap our time together. It's good for us to be together. It's an occasion of joy and celebration. We're glad for it. And just a couple of the things that you know are coming, a continuation of our whole life worship. There are ways to give on the Church Center app as well as boxes in the back. We've got a slide for that. Jack Simpson counted last week. There are 5 whole ways, which is great. And then we've got the chili cook-off, which is coming tonight. You've already heard a little bit about that, 5 to 6:30. I hope you'll come, bring a game, enjoy the time together. And then next week, on February 14th, it's just any other day, is our second Tuesday gathering. We'll gather at Mulligan's Gaming Pub just down the street, and I hope to see you there. That'd be a nice time for us to gather together. They got a bunch of tables, and we'll play games and visit with one another there. That'll be great. Anything else I'm missing? I'm just looking around. Anything else? Thank you all so much for not just being here today, but for sharing a life together over the last 3 years as we have learned to share our stories. So I invite you to stand as we conclude our time with a benediction. Go now in the hope that God is making all things new. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Good morning, Grandview family. These are your announcements for Sunday, February 5th. We have a chili cook-off coming tonight from 5 to 6:30 here at Grandview's Buffalo campus. My husband, Matt, will be facing off with the previous winner, Glenn Davis, and I think we know who's gonna win that face-off. So come eat some good chili and enjoy some friendly competition tonight. This semester of 2 for 2 is coming up soon, starting March 1st. We'll have signups available sometime this month. Be looking out for those. And we are so looking forward to talking about friends and friendship with you as it fits the Christian life. So make sure to mark off Wednesday nights on your calendar in the coming months. Parents' Night Out is back again this month. On February 17th, parents of young ones are invited to drop their children off from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the Buffalo campus. They should sign up in the app before they drop off their kiddo, and we look forward to giving parents a chance to take a break for an evening. Our Cannonball class returns March 12th through April 2nd from 4 to 5 p.m. at the Buffalo campus. This is an opportunity for those who are considering a path towards baptism to come and find out what all that might mean for their lives. There are lots of ways to get more information about these announcements and anything else going on in our Grandview family. You can do that through checking out our newsletter, going to the information tables at both campuses, or by using the Church Center app. And with all of that in mind, you are in the know.
Good morning. Welcome to the 11 o'clock service, the 11:10 service of Grandview's Christian Church's Cityview campus. I am glad to be here with you all today. Just a couple of things as we are getting situated for our worship. I hope you have already seen the cupcakes over there, and maybe you noticed some of the balloons. Today we get to celebrate our 3-year birthday. Which is, that's exciting. That's good news. And we're doing it around tables, each of us, but then together around this table. And it turns out that as Christians, as followers of Jesus, we have been gathering around tables for a long time. And that's at the heart of what we do as a people together. And I love Leonardo Boff is a theologian in the 20th century, but one of the things he observes as one of the most ancient signs of human intimacy, since the relationships that sustain the family are built and rebuilt continuously through it. I'm not sure I read that sentence correctly. Table fellowship is one of the most ancient signs of human intimacy because the relationships that sustain a family are built and rebuilt and built again and rebuilt again as we gather around the table together. And so this is a way that we will mark occasions and transitions and celebrations together by shaping kind of our external arrangement to reflect what's going on in our spirits, in our life together. So, Table Sunday, welcome. Glad you're here. This is yet another way that we can gather together with honesty, and in a trustworthy place to connect with one another and with God. And so invite you as we turn now to our time of worship through song, to engage with worship, to meet God in a way that God is here present to meet you. If STEM resources help to focus your attention, we've got them back there, although we don't have the full STEM table today, but you can make use of those resources if you need them.
Of course, you're still welcome to sit or stand. As we sing this morning, we want to encourage you to worship in the way that you feel like you can connect the best with God this morning. I'm just going to open us with a prayer, and then we will sing together. God, I thank you for your presence, that you are always with us. I thank you for how you have carried us, and you have breathed life into us as your children, but also as this campus, and that you have given us life, and that you have sustained us over these few years, and that we are still here by your strength and by your grace. And God, I thank you that we are a family, and I ask that you would help us to learn how to be that even more and even deeper, that we can be transparent and vulnerable and love each other well and carry each other well, to support one another in the ways that you have commissioned us to do so. God, I ask that your Spirit will meet us this morning, each of us, where we need to be met, that you will keep teaching us to hear your voice more clearly as you have specifically designed each one of us to hear you. Help us to go deeper. Help your rest to be here with us, and your peace as we are surrounded by a world that is complex and complicated and suffering and in pain. And just help us to partner with you as we walk in that. and to know your goodness. And we love you in Jesus' name. Amen. Come thou fount of every blessing, to my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious song, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mountain, fierce upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither, here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above. Prone to wonder, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above. Our first scripture is Luke 4:16 through 21. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy we're going to take a few minutes and say hello to each other, and then we will be back in just a few minutes for prayer. I'm going to go ahead and reel us back, perhaps a little sooner than normal. And we're going to let Chloe's going to lead us in prayer. Yeah, sorry to crash your conversation. Go sit down. Kindly.
Would you pray with me? God, how could we keep from praising you? You have surrounded us with signs of your artistry and compassion. Why would we spare our foggy-breathed awe when the sun casts the sky in pink on these cold winter mornings? Why would we reserve our heaviest sorrows when you have always listened to them? Why would we save up our joy while we have this community to share it with? We gather together this morning in praise, in reflection, and in hope. Despite our experiences, despite our ages, and despite our doubts, we walk alongside one another through our faith journeys. Our hope in you has held us together, an ark on a sea of change. We have greeted newcomers and said farewells to old members. We have reached out desperately to you and to each other through a global era of uncertainty, and you and this community reached back. Even recently, we have been wading through transition, and you had already placed people in our community who could lead, who could teach, and who did rise to the occasion. If Abram could leave his homeland, if Moses could pick up his staff, if Mary could bear a miracle child, then we can trust that through you, our transitions will become growth. God, as we enter this new era, we ask that you guide us as a congregation to do good. Open our eyes to the work that waits for us in our surrounding community and within our own walls. Guide our leaders, old and new, to find the right words and to hear with understanding. We ask that you help this congregation to be purposeful for those wandering, wondering, and unwanted. Be with us through the we'll figure it out moments, and remind us that even as we change, you do not. Help us to align our hopes and dreams for this community with yours. May we, as a congregation, grow into a deeper and more meaningful relationship with you. Amen.
Our sermon text this morning is from Romans chapter 8, 18 through 22. I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now. The word of the Lord.
Well, it's finally here. The day that you have all been waiting for with bated breath. We finally have cupcakes at church. Emery and Eva Kate recommended I try and start with a joke, so I did my best, but I got mixed reviews over here, and that's okay. It really is a bit of an occasion today, and not just for one or two reasons. There's a few things coming together today. We start a new sermon series that will take us to the season of Lent at the end of this month. It's called the Restoration Project, and all we're going to do in this series is try and take a bird's eye view of God's entire work and plan for the whole world. So that's all we're going to do for the next 3 weeks, but we'll get it all kind of covered and touched on in these next few weeks. But we've mentioned it, you've heard it already. Today's our third birthday, which is just good news, and it's exciting. It's an occasion for a celebration. Oh, wow, yeah, the double applause. It's good news. It's fun to celebrate together and to use it as an opportunity to take stock and to look around and tell some of the stories, to give thanks to God that we've made it, because that's not been a given the whole time. This is also a turning point, a time for our community as we are transitioning from a time of interim preaching and leadership. It's the first time I get to preach as the Cityview campus minister, which is exciting and daunting all at once. Wow, that's so great. I wasn't trying to fish for that. Sometimes it's just hard to describe how it feels. It's a lot. But as if all of that wasn't enough, I thought, how could I add to the context of the morning to make it just even a little trickier to figure out how to tie everything together? And I thought, I know what we could do. We could set up some round tables and meet in a circle and just kind of mix things up on purpose. And it's our first table Sunday. I have mentioned that in the start of the service that we'll do this periodically as a way to kind of reorient our time and space and change the service up a little bit, and as a way of kind of aligning our internal orientation by moving around our external positioning. And that's one of the gifts that we have in a flexible space like this that we're really glad for it. So all of that to say, there are so many different kinds of good things that we could talk about and mention today, and I'm not going to try and hit them all, but I am going to try and make a couple of observations about birthday parties in general. And I think by looking at birthday parties. It might help us to parse the present moment where we find ourselves as a part of our church community and as a part of our world. And I think it will prepare us to meet the Romans 8 passage that Amber read for us. So, at birthday parties, we tell stories. I'm imagining like a little kid's birthday party where the kids kind of roll around or do whatever on the floor together, and the parents or grandparents, aunts, uncles, whoever it is, you just fall to telling stories. Oh, I remember when she took her first steps, or you and Grandpa always did have that special thing ever since that one time when, and the stories just start to come like that, don't they? We're drawn to telling those good, hopeful, fun stories and memories. And here, at this party, even though we launched the Cityview campus at what was surely the worst time to start a campus, we've still had a lot of highlights over the last 3 years. We've got great stories to tell. We have reasons to celebrate today. We celebrate today because in 2018, 2019, as Grandview was beginning to feel a pressure and strain to find a way to welcome more people into our family, that we celebrate today because the leadership was brave and creative to imagine beyond a new parking lot. The leadership imagined a new creative way to start a campus just down the street that would not only allow just more people, but that would be a purposefully different sort of place and environment for people to connect with God and one another. That's a reason to celebrate 3 years later today. We celebrate today because not long after announcing that plan, Grandview's leadership assembled a team of Mackenzie and Amber and Chloe, creative, capable leaders to envision and enact a thing that we didn't know what it was going to be like. That's a reason for us to celebrate today. And all throughout the church, people stepped up, many of you stepped up to commit to being a part of this new thing called Cityview, either for a short period of time to help reach stability, or whether to say, we're willing to go and commit to this new thing that we don't know what it will be like. That's reason to celebrate. Together, we have committed financially. We have learned how to do all of these little setup things and the signs and the TVs. We didn't know how to do that before, but we've learned that together. That's a reason to celebrate today. We've celebrated baptisms together. We have met many people because of this campus that we wouldn't have met otherwise. Many of you all are connected here because we have a place and a gathering here. And that is good news and a reason to celebrate. Many of us have found a lifeline here when our faith or our connection to the church or to Christian community has been strained or broken or fractured. Many of us have found a connection here that we had lost or we had not been able to find in another place. That is reason to celebrate. We celebrate college students. You all are not just showing up as a part of the college age group. You have become an important part of the life of this campus, not just because you show up, but because many of you all are important leaders in the congregation, serving in multiple ways to help this congregation grow. And that is reason to celebrate for us today. We remember some events and moments that stand out. We celebrate on February 9th, 2020. We had a potluck in here after the services were over. We filled this place with tables and food, sharing a delight and an anticipation, expectation of what God was going to do through our church, in our church, as we gathered at a Cityview campus. Some of us have met some really hard times in the last 3 years, and we have found encouragement and support and care and friendship when we didn't know where to find it. We found that here as a part of this church, and that is good news, reason to celebrate. We remember Mackenzie's creative vision for a creative Stations of the Cross experience on Palm Sunday that has become a staple of our church's liturgical year that we look forward to as an entire church? How many times did Mackenzie in her sermons or Amber in the way that she has led worship online or in person, how many times have they helped us with an insight or by serving as a place of connection to how the Spirit is at work in our lives or in our church? We celebrate Ash Wednesday, recently the gathering at the gallery this fall, trivia night, and other sorts of events where we gather the whole church here in a new space that causes us all to draw together as we figure out how to meet together in a new place. So many things have been so good these last 3 years. That's reason to celebrate. But birthday parties, you don't always just tell all of the good stuff, because it helps no one to just try and keep on the sunny side, as it were. So much of the last 3 years, on top of how tough any 3 years are, so much of the last 3 years has been especially difficult. And although it may feel counterintuitive to acknowledge hard times or hard memories, or maybe it would seem better to say, oh, those are in the past, those are behind us now, that's not really how birthday parties go, is it? You tell the highlights for a time, but then you remember the time your child spent in the NICU, or the year they spent hardly sleeping at all, so you were tired and angry for a whole year until your kid figured out how to sleep through the night. These stories have a way of coming up because they're a part of the story. And friends, you don't need to be reminded that after we launched on February 9th of 2020, we had 6 Sunday morning services before COVID changed our world. That's on a big scale, but to bring it closer to home and our individual experiences, we have to mention some of the pain and some of the difficulties in our lives over the last few years. Joy and I went back through the Instagram timelines as best as we could this week and counted, I think, at least 5 times that we went online, and then we came back in person, and we did reservations so that we could make sure people were spread out, and we recommended masks while we were still gathering, and then we closed again because the numbers were spiking, and trying to be responsible, but also knowing that our gatherings were an important connection to one another and to God. And that was a hard, difficult time. We have known in our lives the sting of death these last 3 years. We have grieved brothers and grandparents, family and friends, mentors in this church, in our communities outside the church. Together as a part of the church, we have endured divorces. We've felt the stress and strain of shifting faith in our own lives, and how disorienting and scary that can be to feel that the connection that I once had is not the same as it used to be. We have felt fear and sadness as friends or family have been unable or uninterested to stay connected to this church or to Christian communities. That has been hard and scary. We have felt our own anxiety increase through these hard times, often directly connected with our church experiences. I mentioned earlier, as an occasion for celebration, the times when we have met hard times and we have felt support from the community. But one thing that we grieve is that many of us have met hard things and felt alone. We haven't been met by community sometimes. Often, sometimes, we have been part of what has hurt one another. We grieve that. You remember the uncertainty we felt when Mackenzie announced her resignation? A concern about who we were going to be, what was going to come next. We'd never had a Cityview campus without her guidance, without her leadership and vision. And friends, that's just a short list of some of the things in our immediate community. We shouldn't gloss over the often apocalyptic feeling that has been so prevalent the last 3 years. We've witnessed major tragedies and brokenness. The pandemic alone has been the cause of an estimated 6.8 million deaths worldwide. In our country and in the world, we have witnessed violence and war, mass shootings and police brutality, the effects of climate change, global unrest in the midst of people who are not at peace. We feel the increase of loneliness, the decline of mental health that our culture is experiencing, that we feel in our own lives. Our public spheres have been polarized, and our national leaders are unable to engage in dialogue that brings about hope or a direction. And I know that we just told some of the stories about the things that we are excited and thankful and celebrating today for these last 3 years. But even as we tell those good stories, we feel there's a strain in us, right? Because those aren't the only stories of the last 3 years. They aren't the only stories of our whole lives together. We know things haven't been right, and in fact, they've often felt very, very wrong. This brings us to what we heard from Paul today in Romans chapter 8. Paul is working out a theology for a people who are under duress. They are navigating internal tensions as well as a vulnerable social standing as a young church, a young group of Christians in Rome. This community of people that Paul loves is experiencing disorientation and despair. They are wondering if their future together is worth the pain and the fear that they have right in front of them. Paul writes elsewhere about giving thanks in all circumstances and being joyful. But in Romans, you can get the sense that Paul himself, as well as the communities he's writing to, are wearied by the present state of affairs. Surely God will set things right and is already at work. Paul is firm on this. But it just doesn't look like it all the time, does it? Paul describes the way that all of creation is groaning, is in pain, being stretched between what is the case right now and what might, could, or should be in the future that God is bringing about. Things aren't how they're supposed to be. And our experience in the middle is painful. It's agonizing. And this is where we begin our Restoration Project series. We're calling this sermon Recognize, because for Paul and for us, expectation and hope in God's project to restore all things together begins with a recognition that things right now are not as they should be. And friends, this isn't intended as a way to try and convince anybody that things are worse than they are. But beginning here, I hope, can feel like a gift, like a validation that the strain that we have felt in our lives, in our communities, that you're right. There is a strain. There is a pain that we feel because things are not right, and it is precisely there that we begin talking about hope or expectation. The world, our lives really are messed up. For Paul, these groans, this stretching of the fabric of creation, he writes that they are like labor pains, the experience of giving birth to a hopeful new life for the world, such that the experience of longing for something else, although it is painful, is a confirmation that our lives are oriented towards something hopeful and true. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. writes about this tension where we feel the strain between the way things are and the way things can and should be. He calls it maladjustment. He says, there are certain things in our nation and in the world about which I am proud to be maladjusted, which I hope all people will be maladjusted to. And he has a list of things in his in this speech that we ought to be maladjusted toward segregation and discrimination and religious bigotry, and he continues, his list is long. And friends, it is the same for us. We ought to be maladjusted. It ought to feel wrong when we see violence, when we see evil being done, when we hurt one another. That ought not to sit right with us. We ought to refuse to see the difficulties in our lives, the conflict, the sin that we experience, the sin that we do. We ought to refuse to accept that as normal or something to get used to, as something to expect in the future that God is bringing about. Because what we learn in Paul is that our recognition that things aren't right is not one we make alone. In the next verses after the section that Amber read for us, we learn that it is not just creation groaning, but that God, by the Spirit among us, in us, groans with us. That God is present with us, also groaning, also yearning for the future which is coming. Such that the whole thing then eventually becomes flipped, where we begin to hope and to see that it is evil itself, it is injustice itself, it is violence itself that is maladjusted, that is not suitable, does not have a place in the future kingdom that God is at work restoring. But for now, our experience of disorder and strain is a testament to our common calling, our invitation to live as a part of the kingdom of God, that reign of peace and flourishing for all of creation. And at this party, we don't just share the highlights, but we share what's been painful, where we're groaning, and we find that by bringing our honest pains together, we find that we are not groaning alone, that we are groaning together as a people, and that God meets us here to groan with us. And this is why at a party, telling the hard parts has a way of enriching the celebration, of creating an occasion for gratitude. And we have to be really careful here, my friends, to make sure we're saying this right. The hard parts and the painful things that we've shared, they are an appropriate part of our celebration because God has gathered us here in spite of them. We're not saying that our hardships and difficulties have been a necessary kind of justification for our time together. We're not putting things on a scale to say things are so good that the bad things weren't really bad. We're not saying that. We also shouldn't imply that all of the hurt and the pain and the difficulties behind us, and we don't have any of that with us anymore. Because that's not true, friends. I expect fully that we have in this room unresolved conflicts. We have tensions and anxieties that are still present with us as we strain for what will be and is not yet. But when we gather together as a maladjusted people, and our senses are attuned at this table to the kingdom that God is bringing, it opens us to be a people of hope. And in hope, Paul says later in Romans 8, we are saved. When something big in my life happens, I find as I'm asked about it and I tell the story a few times, I revert to becoming somewhat of a bit guy, which Moses also thinks of himself as a bit guy. And it's just a way of kind of developing kind of a way of telling a story that's humorous but efficient, informative, but you get a bit of laugh, as you're telling this story that you tell over and over again. And so I've actually got kind of a bit about the way that I tell the Cityview story. And I actually already did it with you all, and I did get a little bit of a laugh where that little part where I go, well, we started the Cityview campus. We launched in February of 2020, and we had 6 Sundays till the world ended. And it was the worst time to plant a campus. And every time people are like, yeah. And there's like kind of a humor thing there, and it connects with the feeling that we've all had. March 2020 was crazy. A couple of months ago, I was at Welcome to Grandview, which is a class we have about every other month or so to help folks who are new to Grandview get oriented to just some information and how to get connected at Grandview. And I met a woman named Alexa Northrup. Her husband and her kiddos, they are getting connected over at the Buffalo campus. They've never been over here. We were sitting at a table together, and she learned that I was the children's minister here. And she said, well, what's the Cityview campus like? She didn't know anything. I was like, perfect chance. Bit time, And so I do the whole thing, and I get to the line. I was like, well, and Alexa, it's just the worst time to start a new campus. The bit did not land at all. It was so disappointing, but Alexa received it. She kind of was even confused. She even missed the occasion for humor because she furrowed her brow and kind of turned her head like this, and with a perfect seriousness said, well, it seems more like to me that we started the Cityview campus just in time. Friends, that moment for me brought a rush of clarity and resolve, of peace and purpose. I've been a part of this thing since before it ever started meeting, and her offhand comment after never being a part of a gathering here helped to change the way that I imagined our whole story. Because, friends, we have not had an easy run of it. It's been so hard as a church, as individuals, through really, really difficult times. But I tell you what, I've come to believe Alexa. I do believe that the Cityview campus was born just in time. And that's the way that God often works. In our own lives, the Cityview campus has been a lifeline for us. For some of us, coming just in time as our faith, as our connections have been fracturing or fraying. For our whole church, the Cityview campus was just in time, and we were forced into this extended period of vulnerability and commitment right at a time when a lot of churches were really struggling to maintain any sort of connection. We had this galvanizing, motivating experience together as a whole church that kept us going through the really hard COVID years. I know folks in this room who couldn't be here without this campus. And friends, that is a just-in-time sort of thing. God has a way of working through what couldn't be predicted or bet on, or what strategists would say, oh, don't plant that 5 weeks before the pandemic starts. God has a way of working just in time. And as we consider the big picture of God's restoration project these next few weeks, we begin with the recognition that things now aren't as they should be out there or in here. And we are a part of this project where we are experiencing God's restoration in our lives, in our community, but also by our gathering together, the life that we share, with one another, the life that we share with our surrounding communities, we also begin to be part of this restoration work. That it is through us that God is at work in our families, in our neighborhoods, on our campuses. We are part of the project, a present sign of what God is doing, a future reality that is prefigured and celebrated around this table. And so just like that, we are gathered here around this table, a misfit group of maladjusted people, a community that is maladjusted to the brokenness and strain we experience in the world because we are orienting our life together toward a peaceful reunion meal around the table. In many ways, we've had a hard time, and we come limping to the table, but today, at this party, we have a chance to gather here at this table in anticipation and hope that God is at work. From the very beginning, Jesus followers have been a family around a table, receiving the gifts from God to share with one another. And so that's what we do each week, and that's what we'll do today. Amber will read for us the communion liturgy, and as she does, Chloe and I will distribute this bread and this juice to each of your tables to share in this meal together in the way that followers of Jesus have forever. Invite someone at the table to be brave and be first to break off a piece of the bread, but offer it to your neighbor. Serve one another this meal as we share together in the life that God is bringing about, a taste of it even now.
Let's look at this together. This is the part of our worship where we culminate and we unite here together at Jesus' table. In communion, the loaf and cup help us reflect on the history of our tradition in the Last Supper. Communion is a practice where we get to come face to face with a member of our community and be reminded that we are in this together. And by receiving this from another Christ follower, we are reminded that we are recipients of Christ's grace. Jesus set this table with place for anyone who call themselves followers of Jesus. It is not a table for those who are deserving, as we know Jesus was ridiculed for the inclusivity of his table. It is a table where we all can find life. On the same night that Jesus was betrayed and arrested, leading to his crucifixion, he ate this meal with his followers. We follow the same teaching and example he left with them, and that the global church has followed since. As Jesus did, we give thanks, and we break this bread as a representation of Jesus' body broken for us. We take and we drink of the cup as a representation of the blood that poured from Jesus' body, shed for us. And when we eat and drink this together, we are coming together as the no matter what family that God made us through Jesus. Together we remember his death, we proclaim his resurrection, and we await his return to us. you have a decision that you'd like to make or a step in furthering your faith or your walk with Jesus, or if you would like prayer for anything, or if you would just like to become a member and a family of this community here, Nathan is around me, and you can go speak to him and he'll help you. Let's sing this together. You consider staying. We will feast in the house of Zion. We will sing with our hearts restored. His done great things. We will say together. We will feast and weep no more. We will not be burned by the fire, 'cause He is the Lord our God. We are not consumed by the fire. Upheld, protected, gathered up. We will feast in the house of Zion. We will sing with our hearts restored. His done great things. We will say together. We will feast and weep no more. In the dark of night, before the dawn, my soul be not afraid, for the promised morning will how long. O God of Jacob, be my strength. We will feast in the house of Zion. We will sing with our hearts restored. His done great things. We will say together. We will feast and weep no more. Every vow we broken and betrayed, you are the faithful one, and from the garden to the grave, bind us together, bring shalom. We will feast in the house of Zion. We will sing with our hearts restored. He's done great things. We will say together. We will feast and weep no more. He has done great things. We will say together. We will feast and weep no more.
Number 3, thank you. It's good for us to be together in worship today, and as just a couple of things to remind you of, we continue in whole life worship, and there are ways to give of your finances at the boxes or on the Church Center app. There are 5 ways. Jack counted them last week, so we can be sure there are 5, and it's verified there. But beyond that, we have a couple of things coming up that I want you to know about. We've been talking about it each week, but the chili cook-off and game night is tonight from 5 to 6:30. Would love to enjoy that time with you. Come teach me how to play hearts or spades. And chili will be in there in plenty, and so come and enjoy that time together. That will be great. And then also want to let you know that next week is our monthly second Tuesday gathering. If you're doing the math, the second Tuesday this month is the 14th of the month. But nevertheless, you are invited to hang out at the second Tuesday hangout. We're meeting at Mulligan's Gaming Pub, which is just right on Main Street. Bunch of tables. They've got games there. Bring games yourself. They've got dinner. Or you can come enjoy the time together. And that is all that I've got for us. I would invite you to stand for a benediction as we conclude our time together this morning. May we go from here in the hope and in the confidence that God is at work to restore all things. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.